welcome to Visions. I'm Mirella Rich. Today our guests are director Joe Lowe and producer Dennis Smith of the documentary called Constructing Fear. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, can you tell us what is this documentary about?
The film's about something called the Australian Building and Construction Commission, which was a sort of pseudo-police force put in place to basically destroy the building unions in Australia. And the film focuses on the effect that it's had on ordinary building workers, a lot of whom have been sort of quite intimidated and stood over by these pseudo-police.
And what are some examples of things that have been happening that you cover?
Well, I mean, the lovely thing about Joe's film is that it spreads out all over Australia, and it interviews sort of average Australians, working people who work in the construction industry, people from Western Australia, people from Victoria, people from the city, people from the country, people from New South Wales, all over Australia. And there's a huge spread of people, you know, very sort of average, decent people that we meet in their own homes, and they've all become entrapped in this organisation called the ABCC, which polices the construction industry. And what we learn in Joe's film is that these laws that have been implemented by the Howard government to police the building industry are intrusive, draconian. It's a draconian legislation, and the story that Joe tells in his film, and I'll let him get into the details of how these individuals have been set upon and intimidated by this law. The wash-up of this story is that you get the sense that this is not the modern Australia that most of us perceive that we live in, and that somehow here's a grand story, a very frightening story that slipped under the media radar, and Joe's managed to pick it up. Okay. And it remains under the media radar, and that's one of the reasons we're pleased to be here today, in that when Joe first brought this film to us, we offered it to the ABC, we offered it to SBS, and they wouldn't touch it.
Right. Well, could you tell us about some of these stories then?
I think one of the most striking is the story of Brodeen Wardley. Brodeen Wardley is a single mum with 3 kids who lives in country Victoria, up in Portland. She was elected as a health and safety rep on her job. She had a bus driver approach her one morning to inform her that while he was transporting 12 other workers to the job site, they'd nearly been cleaned up by a freight train at a crossing that didn't have any markings at all. The visibility was very low, and there was basically nothing to make people stop at that crossing. So Brodeen called a meeting. The workers came together, and they basically stopped work for that day while the crossing was fixed. They had flashing lights put in, and part of the hill was actually graded out to make sure that people could see the train, and that was the extent of it. Everyone was kind of happy with the outcome. No one did get killed, and the problem was fixed.
Yeah, so it was like a health and safety issue that had to be attended to.
Yeah, it was a serious health and safety issue.
That, yeah.
Building workers are very aware of health and safety issues because on average in Australia our building workers killed every week. 50 a year die in the building industry. So they're very sensitive to those issues, you know, and she was very sensitive to that. And look, from an outsider's point of view, she did the right thing. Yeah. And that would have been the end of it had it not been for the ABCC. Can you
explain to viewers what the ABCC is, because they don't know?
Well, I mean, I think this story will illustrate it better than anything, you know, you could sort of give as a technical explanation, because the ABCC, the Australian Building and Construction Commission, sent a letter to this woman, to Brodeen, telling her she had to attend a compulsory interview. She was brought into the courthouse in Portland. She was made to sit about 2 metres from her lawyer. He was basically gagged, wasn't able to stop anything happening. She was then asked a series of questions for about 3 hours pertaining to who attended the union meeting, who said what at the union meeting, who voted to stop work, who voted against stopping work. and if she had refused to answer those questions, she would have been put in jail for 6 months. Eventually she was forced to name a name of a colleague before she could get out of that room. When she came out of that room, she couldn't tell anybody about what had happened in there. Again, if she did tell anyone about what happened in there, she would have been jailed for 6 months.
Why such harsh penalties for her?
Look, my interpretation of it is they're basically trying to scare people out of being members of the union, out of being active unionists, trying to scare people out of standing up for themselves, because if they can do that, then they think they can break the union.
Right, and they don't want the union anymore because it's what, costing money, or what's the reason for that?
Oh, I mean, it's largely ideological from the Liberal Party point of view. They hate the trade union movement, they always have. They were set up in opposition to it in the first place. The Liberal Party's long-standing policy is to destroy trade unionism in Australia. So that's what they're trying to do. The builders would like to have building workers getting paid $10 an hour instead of $20 an hour, so that's their agenda. And the ABCC is basically out there taking on individual construction workers and trying to scare the life out of them, so that their union will be weakened, and so that eventually they will be able to pay them $10 an hour and not have to ever stop work over safety issues.
See, one of the things is this lovely title that Joe's chosen for his film, which is Constructing Fear. And obviously it refers to the construction industry, but it also is a sort of a label that's beginning to stick with people, that this current federal government is, in our community, constructing fear, you know. They tried to do it on the docks some years ago, as we all remember and we've seen on TV. And now they're tackling the construction industry. They are in that community of workers, all decent working Australians who just need to go to work and earn their wages. They're constructing fear so that these people will not work together collectively to talk to the bosses, but will go one by one, singularly, cap in hand. And that's the nature of the workplace laws that are taking place in this country, is that break up people who might stand shoulder to shoulder and say, oh, you know, we want this, and treat them as individuals where they're more vulnerable. That's the march of contemporary Australian history. And these are the values that we're asking, or Joe is asking in his film, that modern Australians analyse and say to themselves on polling day, because this is a federal election year, is this the Australia that we want? Is this the Australia we want where in an industry where one person dies every week, it's a dangerous industry, that we can afford to wind back on the values of safety and the way that people can collectively bargain.
Right. We're about to go to a break now. Stay with us. We'll be back with more very shortly.